Welcome to the Foundational Health Podcast, where we provide education and inspiration to help guide you on your journey to look better, feel better, and most importantly, heal better. Hello, and welcome to the Foundational Health Podcast. I'm Dr. Kevin Schultz, and today is for my female listeners and those who support them. We are going to talk about how to go through menopause with less fatigue, less weight gain, less mood swings, and less hot flashes. And obviously, in the ideal world, none of those. I'm going to show you how, as a woman, you can feel more vibrant, more alive, get better sleep, build stronger bones and muscles, and most importantly, have the confidence that you are doing the right things to give yourself the best chance to not just be alive, but to feel alive and thrive through the pre- and post-menopause years of your life. The intent of today's podcast is to show you that you can do this without hormone replacement therapy, despite what you've been told or led to believe. We'll talk about that a little bit later in the show, but for now, I just want you to keep an open mind and realize there are plenty, and I mean plenty, of women who not only make it through the perimenopause and post-menopause years of life without hormone replacement therapy, but they do it while feeling pretty darn great, actually. At least that's what I'm told. So what is their secret? That is what we're going to explore today. Let's kick this off with a rapid-fire Q&A to give you an idea of what you're in store for today. Is weight gain inevitable? Simple answer, no. Is muscle loss inevitable? Yes, but certainly it's not to the extent that most women experience it or believe it to be true. Are big mood swings inevitable? Same as the last answer. Yes, some mood swings, big mood swings, no. And certainly not to the extent that, again, most women report or experience. Should women exercise on an empty stomach? No. You probably heard me say this before if you've listened to my past female-specific podcasts. However, in talking to some women for different reasons, they are very attached to doing this. So they've trained fasted or exercised fasted for years, and they want to continue to do that. So my recommendation, if you're going to continue to do that, then I just highly recommend finding a high-quality essential amino acid that you trust, the one that we trust currently, which is Perfect Aminos by Body Health, and then you would want to take that prior to your exercise instead of food. Should menopausal women focus on zone 2 cardio? This one is a huge no, and we'll dive into this much more later into the show. So to start, let's dive into some basic science and terminology. So I'm going to make this really quick, not get into all of the terminology and all of the science behind menopause and hormones. But what we know is menopause is the one single day on the calendar that marks 12 consecutive months with no menstrual cycle. So it's really just after a woman has gone 1 year, no cycle, and not because of hormones, so that's just happened naturally. 1 year of no cycle, and then that one day after that 1 year, that is actually menopause. Everything before that one day is technically what they call perimenopause. So this is where hormonal changes, mood swings, body composition changes with the weight gain, all of that take place. And honestly, this is that perimenopause is what most women refer to as menopause changes. Not to get too technical, but there technically are perimenopause changes. And then that menopause, again, 1 day. And then everything after that 1 day of 12 consecutive months without a menstrual cycle is called either early menopause, when you're obviously early on, or then it becomes late menopause as you get years into after that 1 day. Let's start with really the biggest question. Like anytime I talk to women about this, whether it's in my office, one-on-one consultations, email consultations, whatever it is, symptoms inevitably are the first talking point. So let's start with talking about symptoms. So here's the deal. And what I find almost nobody is talking about, and this is based on literature, so this isn't my opinion, the majority of symptoms with menopause all come back to inflammation increasing with menopause. And the reason that inflammation increases with menopause is because estrogen is hugely anti-inflammatory. And estrogen lowers dramatically, and I mean dramatically, during the menopause years. So if estrogen lowers and estrogen is responsible for keeping inflammation down, then inflammation has the ability to go up. And when I say dramatic, we're talking 99% lower. So once you're hitting menopause, 99% less estrogen than you used to have when you were younger. So yes, that's a pretty big deal from many standpoints, whether it's mood swings, hot flashes affecting your sleep. Inflammation is what drives all of that. So this is where the thinking comes in that, oh my gosh, estrogen is anti-inflammatory and estrogen is down 99% once a woman reaches menopause. So let's do hormone replacement therapy because really there's going to be no other way to control symptoms. And as I stated before, clearly I'm not a woman. So I am not saying in any way, shape, or form, you shouldn't do that. That's the wrong way. I'm just giving you a different way to look at things because often women are told, yeah, those symptoms are inevitable. You're going to have them unless you do hormone replacement therapy. And that's just not true. So this is where I believe critical thinking is important and why it's so important to put thought into not only this, but really anything in life, and then make your own decision from there. So you really have to ask yourself, if estrogen goes down by 99% in 100% of females in their post-menopause years, so let me repeat that, estrogen goes down by 99% in 100% of females in their post-menopause years, do you believe that's really how God designed women to just rapidly decline and to age rapidly and then to feel horrible while doing it? So I certainly don't believe that, and I pray that you do not believe that either. So if you don't believe that, then you should be asking this or these questions. Are there other things that are supposed to kick in the human body to reduce inflammation to make up for the lack of estrogen? But maybe those other things just simply aren't working as well because of our highly inflammatory diets, our sedentary lifestyles, our toxic lifestyles, our stressed out, busy lifestyles on a daily basis. Next question. Why aren't women in other countries and cultures that are living a natural lifestyle that go through menopause suffering with the same symptoms that women are in America or other countries that are living like us for that matter? So this is why I asked you earlier to keep an open mind because there are plenty of women right here in America as well who not only make it through the perimenopause and postmenopause years of life without hormone replacement therapy, but they also do it without experiencing horrible symptoms. So let's dive into the science and the protocols so we can uncover their secret together. And let me give you a very important, exciting preview to that secret. You do not need to spend countless hours in the gym or ever enter a gym for that matter if you don't want to. And you do not need to restrict food to eat less calories to get results. So we're going to kick it off with exercise. So exercise, really what I'm going to focus on in the beginning is cardio and specifically what is known as zone 2 cardio. So this is more like a fast-paced walk or just a jog on the treadmill or a light bike ride where you're in that zone 2 cardio where heart rate certainly is up and you're working out up a sweat after a while, but you can still easily maintain a conversation. So we're going to focus on that versus what's called HIIT or high intensity interval training, HIIT, if you ever see that anywhere when you're reading about exercise. So for those of you that are not familiar with high intensity interval training, then after we go through some of the science here, I'm going to explain what it is and how to perform it without going into a ton of detail. So what you need to understand is that when we're looking at zone 2 versus HIIT, there is what is called metabolic adaptation. Metabolic adaptation starts taking place within 1 to 2 sessions of doing high intensity interval training. Not 1 to 2 weeks, not 1 to 2 months, not 1 to 2 years. 1 to 2 sessions of high intensity interval training, we see metabolic adaptations when they look at women specifically in studies. So that doesn't mean you're going to immediately see weight loss results and all of a sudden your pants fit better after doing one session of doing HIIT training. Probably doesn't work quite that well. But what it does mean is it does happen very quickly. The adaptation we see scientifically happening quickly. And then for women that do need to lose weight, absolutely that will happen very, very quickly for them versus zone 2. And you will feel the difference. There's no question, because when you improve metabolic adaptation, which is metabolism, you feel better, you have more energy, you have less brain fog, you have more focus, you sleep better because your body is healthier metabolically, meaning you have a better metabolism, which means more weight loss. It means all of those things that I mentioned above, especially better healing. In comparison to high intensity interval training, which we just talked about, when you see those metabolic changes in those 1 to 2 sessions, as I mentioned, with zone 2 cardio, this is where it takes 12 to 16 weeks to see those same changes for most people. So 1 to 2 times of performing it with HIIT training and 12 to 16 weeks of doing zone 2 over and over to see those same changes. That is a huge, huge difference. So also with changes in things like VO2 max, we know that HIIT training, you're going to see those changes in as little as 3 weeks. And then zone 2, still that 12 to 16 week window. And I could go on and on because we see these changes with so many different things when you're comparing these 2 different forms of cardiovascular exercise. And as I stated earlier with letting you in on the little exciting secret, not having to spend hours in a gym or hours doing this, this is one of those reasons, because zone 2 cardio, you have to do for a long time before you're going to see some benefit, and the benefits aren't that great anyway, whereas HIIT training can be done really, really quickly. And then, so back to VO2 max. VO2 max it's not a little thing, and most people I realize aren't really that familiar with it. Basically, it is just how your heart, your cardiovascular system, your breathing responds to exercise and improves with exercise. And we know that VO2 max, so I said it's not a little thing, so this is what I mean by that. VO2 max is the number one indicator of whether or not someone will get cardiovascular disease, male or female. So that's a pretty big deal. And again, that improves, VO2 max improves quickly within 3 weeks of doing high intensity interval training and doing it the right way. We also know that high intensity interval training increases the strength, size, and quality of muscles. So quality meaning that not all muscle is the same. Muscle quality means that muscles that are measured by MRI show up differently when you're doing HIIT training. So that means that you're developing leaner, healthier, stronger muscle instead of muscle that can be often more fatty with different types of exercise. So really big deal. And that's, again, MRI studies. So that is done in studies, in labs with menopausal women, looking at groups of women not doing HIIT versus women doing HIIT training. So really big difference there when you're building quality muscle, not just muscle. HIIT also reduces inflammation, which reduces pain for joints, muscles, even in people with severe osteoarthritis, rheumatoid arthritis. They see that when they do HIIT training, because of how it brings down inflammation in the body, they have significant pain reduction. And just a reminder of what we just got done talking about earlier, inflammation is a huge factor for the menopause symptoms because of the lack of estrogen, where estrogen is normally going to bring down that inflammation in a woman that's not experiencing perimenopause and post-menopause. When you don't have that estrogen, things like HIIT training can bring that inflammation down and keep it in check. So HIIT training, great for so many reasons. And if you are doing HIIT training, then you just want to do it right. So meaning that, so now going back to not having to take a lot of time, HIIT training is not something that you should be doing on a daily basis. And if you are, you're probably not going hard enough, first of all, because you shouldn't be able to repeat this day after day after day after day on a daily basis. So you're probably not doing it right in the first place. And then there also actually is a detriment in the studies to doing it too much. So the sweet spot is a maximum of 3 times a week or 2 to 3 times a week. So one, they don't see, certainly better than nothing, but there's not that many benefits. If you get to 4 or more, it starts to become a little bit detrimental for most people. So 2 to 3 sessions per week is really that sweet spot. And then approximately 4 to 6 bouts per session. So what that means really, so we're talking about high intensity interval training. So a bout would be somebody jumping up and down as fast as they can for 20 seconds or riding a bike as fast as they can for a minute, followed by some rest, followed by another bout of going as hard as they can for 20 to 60 seconds. So 2 to 3 sessions per week, 4 to 6 bouts per session. Hopefully that makes sense. I know if this is not something you're real familiar with, it gets a little tricky. Keep in mind, first of all, that depending on what you listen to, what you read, who you follow, you're going to get a variety of different recommendations. And most people will claim that theirs is the best. Their study showed this. But the cool thing is when it comes to this, that there are multiple studies showing multiple different ways to do high-intensity interval training, or what Dr. Stacy Sims refers to more as sprint training. It's a little bit different. The cool thing is, whether you're going hard for 20 seconds or a minute, as long as you're giving close to max effort or giving max effort, that's when you're going to see the results. So in one sense, you can't really screw it up. So another important thing to keep in mind, the longer your effort, the longer your rest is typically going to be, unless you're in phenomenal cardiovascular condition with great VO2 max. But for the majority of people, for example, you would want to do like 20 seconds of an exercise as hard as you can, followed by about a minute or 2 of rest to allow your heart rate to come back down before you would go back at it again for 20 seconds. Or for somebody that's doing a minute as hard as you can, they might be then resting for 3 to 5 minutes to allow that heart rate to come down to the point where they feel like they can go as hard as they can for close to a minute again. And again, really anything in between that 20 seconds and a minute, can't screw it up. So another really important thing to keep in mind, that the cool thing is you can pick any exercise that works for you, as long as you're giving it your all and as long as your heart rate is going up. And I mean anything. So for somebody that is very overweight, that might be simply standing and then sitting and standing repeatedly from a chair as fast as you can for 20 seconds. In fact, they have done that study exactly for very obese women, and they get great results doing it, because that might be as hard for them to do as it is for somebody else who's in great physical condition to do a 36-inch box jump up and down, or to go sprint on a track 200 or 300 meters. So it's all relative to your starting point and your physical condition. Nutridyne is my number one choice for the vast majority of my family supplements. I'm a huge fan of nearly everyone taking what I call the foundational 4 supplements: a multivitamin, a spore-based probiotic, omega-3 fish oil, and vitamin D3 with K2. The large majority of people are deficient in many of these nutrients, and they are the building blocks to gut health, immune system strength, brain health, heart health, and every other aspect of your health. Don't fall into the trap of chasing symptoms with supplements, and instead start to rebuild your health with the foundational 4. We partnered with Nutridyne so that you can save 15% on every order, and not just with the foundational 4, but all of your other supplements as well. Go to foundationalhealth365.com, click on Shop Brands, and then Nutridyne, set up your account, and you're all set to automatically get 15% off all orders. Now let's get back to the Foundational Health Podcast. All of that being said, keep in mind that the current guidelines and recommendations from the healthcare, the exercise community tell women to focus on 150 minutes per week of zone 2 exercise. But what you have to remember, these are the current general guidelines, and this is not actually based on studies on postmenopausal women. In fact, it is typically based on college-aged, not even women, college-aged men. They see great results, so they say, oh, well, it must work for postmenopausal women. And the reality is that it doesn't work anywhere near as well and actually can be detrimental compared to doing high-intensity interval training. Zone 2, it's not bad for you. So that's not the point I'm trying to get across here. I'm not trying to get across the point you shouldn't go for walks or do anything like that. The focus should be on high-intensity interval training, not thinking that you're going to get great anti-inflammatory results and muscle-building results from standing on a treadmill and jogging for an hour. In fact, it can be the opposite. It can raise inflammation. It can raise cortisol levels in the body, which decreases your ability to build muscle and to build bone. So the focus should be on high-intensity interval training and not zone 2 cardio for the majority of people, especially women in this stage of life. So a really good goal is, as I mentioned, 2 to 3 high-intensity interval training sessions per week with 4 to 6 bouts of high-intensity interval exercise per session. Okay, so moving on from cardio, we're going to go into resistance training. So with resistance training, now we're talking about bands and barbells and weights where you're trying to actually build muscle to strengthen muscle. Resistance really means to either build or strengthen a muscle or to do both. So another very important thing to remember with hormonal changes as it relates to resistance training, and especially with estrogen, and specifically estrogen, is that estrogen to a female, for the most part, it's testosterone to a male. Obviously not exactly, but when it comes to muscle, that's really what it is. Estrogen to a female is like testosterone to a male, and that estrogen is vital for maintaining strong muscles. So this doesn't mean you can't grow and maintain muscle. It just means you will probably need a better, more consistent approach with heavier weights and less reps, which we're going to get into. And then just as we talked about earlier with how amazing God created our bodies when it comes to other things besides estrogen taking over for reducing inflammation, the same thing happens here with a reduction in estrogen and the body still being able to build muscle despite that 99% reduction. So here's the science based on menopause-aged women. A focus on HIIT training instead of cardio, instead of zone 2 cardio rather, as well as a focus on heavier weights with lower reps for resistant training helps your nerves. This is the key. So it helps your nerves communicate more efficiently with the muscle fibers, then encouraging the muscle fibers and the nerves to work together and to grow and strengthen rather than relying on signals from estrogen. So all of that is just saying it doesn't matter that estrogen is 99% lower, and they used to believe that that meant because it's so important in muscle building that women can't build muscle and they're just going to waste away. That's not true. We see that there's this amazing adaptation that takes place, and it takes place really with any resistance training. It just improves with the type that I've already mentioned and will describe a little bit more. So how cool is that? I mean, we see this show up over and over. The way that our bodies are made is just absolutely miraculous, and it can adapt and overcome to almost anything. This would be another great time, as I've talked about in past podcasts, to address the fact that most women are worried that lifting heavier weights will make them look bulky. So instead of taking my word for it, I'm just going to really quote what Dr. Stacy Sims says about it. Ultimately, she says you have to do almost no cardio whatsoever. You have to go to the gym for hours every single day. You have to lift very heavy weights at high reps for a very long period of time, eat a massive amount of calories if you want to get bulky. And if you're not doing that, then getting bulky is just not a concern, and it's not going to happen with what I'm describing to you here. So instead, as we talked about earlier, you will build healthier, leaner, stronger, better quality muscle, as evidenced by MRIs, not bulky muscles. So just get that out of your head once and for all. So in my opinion, and according to the science, it's really time that we just drop the stereotype that men lift weights and women do cardio. The reality is both women and men need cardio and weights, but you just need to tweak how you're doing that if you're a woman in your menopause years of life, and make sure that you're doing the right type of cardio, the right type of weightlifting. And when you're doing that, you're going to improve your odds, symptoms reducing, and going through life thriving instead of just being alive. So let's get into a little bit more detail. As you get into your mid-30s, estrogen and progesterone start to change, and they change pretty rapidly. And then because of that, it's important to change up the way that you work out. So this is where you want to move into what they refer to as power-based training with heavier weights and more effort, ideally. So because of the hormonal changes, if you continue with 10 to 12 reps, like the recommendation is for teenagers or women in their 20s and women in their early 30s, sometimes even mid-30s, if you continue with that 10 to 12 reps, it's not bad for you by any means. It just becomes harder for you to gain muscle and build strength because of these hormonal changes that are taking place in the body. So power-based means 0 to 6 to 8 reps, in my opinion, for the average person, unless you're somebody that was really, you're very fit, you've been doing this for a long period of time, or you've hired a personal trainer with some specific goals. Really, I recommend highly focusing on more of that 6 to 8 rep range for the majority of people. And then it's not about going through the motions. You can't just pick a light weight and say, I'm going to do 6 squats or 6 bicep curls and think that you're going to get results. Better than nothing, yes, of course, but it's about the quality, not the quantity. So meaning that by the time you get to that 6, 7, 8 bicep curl, you want to feel like you can't hardly do anymore, or if you can do more, you're going to be cheating and losing form a lot. So it's really about picking the right weights, which comes with the more that you exercise, the easier that is to do, and then doing it with a lot of effort with that repetition every single time that you're doing it. So obviously, again, if you're doing nothing right now, the last thing you want to do is to go out and try squatting heavy weights, to do anything crazy. You can certainly have those goals, but in the beginning, you just want to be smart. You want to listen to your body. You want to find somebody that you trust, either locally that you can work with, whether it's a friend, family member that can go into the gym with you or work out with you at home, or to find somebody online. And I'll give you a few resources that I think are fantastic for women at any stage of life a little bit later on. So you also want to remember that any resistance is better than none. Any movement is better than none. So don't think if you're not willing to lift heavy weights that you should just do nothing. Definitely don't want that to be the takeaway here. And even if you're doing your own body weight for body squats and you can only do 6 reps, great, then do 6 reps. You just want to make sure that you're always following that something is always, always better than nothing, and movement is great for you. You also want to have a long-term focus for quality of life. Actually, I just had a great conversation with a gentleman in my office yesterday who talked about all of his friends that are at retirement age and his wife's friends that are talking about, time to slow down. We're so excited for retirement so we can slow down. Whereas they're looking at it the opposite. They're looking at speeding up their movement, doing more hiking, doing more working out so that they don't have to worry about slowing down until they're in their late 80s or 90s, if even then, which I think is absolutely amazing mindset. And I think that is something that everybody should adopt, even at a early age in your teenagers or even your 20s or 30s for that matter. So that should be the long-term focus, but it's still fantastic to set short-term goals on whether it is just simply, I want to look better, feel better, heal better, which I talk about all the time, or a short-term goal of I want to be able to lift this much weight or run this fast or run this far. Those things are all still great. Short-term goals, long-term goals, both fantastic. And then I mentioned free weights in the beginning with resistance training. Just to touch on this a little bit, as I did earlier in the Female Health Hormone podcast a couple months ago, free weights are barbells, they're dumbbells, things like bands. Those are always going to be better just because of how they work the balance and intrinsic muscles and engage your nervous system more. Those are always going to be better than machines just because of that, but that doesn't mean machines are bad. I love machines when I occasionally do go to a gym. I think they're fantastic. You just want to make sure that you're incorporating those other things which are going to work on joints and balance and everything that much better. So here's the 3 ladies that I mentioned that I recommend following. So number 1 is a woman that calls herself Train with Joan. Short story here is when she was 70 years old, after battling multiple health issues and having all kinds of problems in her life and feeling awful, she finally listened to her daughter and decided that she was going to take control. She made a decision to take charge of her life and to start transforming her life. And that was at the age of 70, when she was very overweight and battling, again, lots of health issues. And her transformational story is incredibly inspiring. So if you Google Train with Joan, you can find her website. That's amazing for older ladies in their menopause years. So highly recommend her. There's another woman called Haley Happens Fitness. Her focus is on 40-plus-year-olds. So women that are just starting to go through perimenopause or already into it a little bit, but really those perimenopause, menopause years of life. She's got some really, really great content, great programs. And I mentioned Stacy Sims already a couple times and multiple times in past podcasts. I'm a huge fan of her. And the great thing is with Stacy Sims, she has excellent recommendations, excellent programs for women of all ages, whether it's teenagers that are just experiencing those hormonal changes in their life, or somebody that's in their late menopause stages of life. So we have links to all of those wonderful ladies in the show notes, or you can just Google them and find exactly what you're looking for. So if we tie the cardio and the resistance training all together, a really good goal for a weekly exercise routine is 4 to 6 days per week. So don't think that I just said you have to do it 6 days per week. You can do 4, you can even do less, but this is just a really good goal, 4 to 6 days per week with 2 to 3 of high intensity interval training and 2 to 3 of resistance. But guess what? You could say, I only have time for 2 days a week, and you could combine those two. You can do resistance training followed by 15 to 20 minutes of HIIT training right afterwards or right before. So there's no way to screw this up. Something is better than nothing. Just make sure you're not doing nothing. Final exercise takeaway, and this is a really big one. Constant cardio combined with the lack of resistance training and calorie restriction is absolutely chipping away at your bones and muscles. And hopefully you realize that's not something you want to do. I'm going to repeat that. Constant cardio, lack of resistance training, and calorie restriction is absolutely chipping away at your bones and muscles as you age. Shifting gears, nutrition and supplementation. First of all, we just talked about exercise. So let's talk about fueling and refueling for exercise in life. So ideally as a woman, you don't want to exercise fasted. But if you prefer, for some reason, then at a minimum, as I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, do amino acids that won't break your fast, but it will still give you fuel to use for your muscles and your bones during exercise. When it comes to food in general, the ideal is just following an organic, ideally, doesn't have to be, but an organic, whole food, well-rounded, wide variety diet. So a wide variety of nuts and seeds, fruits and vegetables, meats and eggs. You want variety, you want quality. So the focus there with all of that, just because it's not a focus for most people and they're missing out, is building your meals around protein. You want to shoot for around a gram of protein per pound of body weight. You don't have to get crazy with this. You don't have to measure it. You just get an idea. Google what is a gram of protein or how many grams of protein are in a quarter pound of beef, how many grams of protein are in the average egg. This does not have to be exact. So around a gram of protein per body weight, but that's a range. You can be higher, you can be a little bit lower, and that's ideal body weight. So I had somebody ask a question on Facebook a couple weeks ago, like, are you kidding me? Like, do I really have to eat 300 grams of protein every day when I'm 300 pounds? And the answer is no. This is ideal body weight. So the ideal body weight doesn't have to be perfect. You don't have to go to a chart or go to a doctor and find out what's my ideal body weight. If it's about 150 pounds, you think, great, then shoot for around 150 grams of protein. So don't make things more difficult than they have to be. Don't count calories. That is just going to make it more challenging to stick with anything. And then you want to focus on getting that protein in 3 to 4 meals per day, ideally. Ideal protein are things like fatty wild-caught fish, Alaskan sockeye salmon, sardines, mackerels. These are all amazing sources of omega-3s. They're great for hormone balance in the body. You also want to focus on things like grass-fed meats, pasture-raised eggs, and poultry, all fantastic sources of protein. Focus on things like cruciferous vegetables with broccoli and cabbage and kale, probiotic-rich foods like kefir. All of these things are great for you. Sauerkraut, kimchi, also really, really good. So 30 minutes after waking up is when women have a spike in cortisol, and that's when you should eat. So you probably, if you've listened to my past podcasts, you remember hearing that, but worth repeating. 30 minutes after you wake up, that is when women specifically get a spike in cortisol. And ideally, to keep that cortisol in check right then and for the day, this is when you want to eat. You don't have to have a meal. You just want to consume about 15 grams of protein, 30 grams of carbs. That's not a lot of food at all. You just want to get some fuel on board, as Dr. Stacy Sims says, to lower that cortisol spike. So this becomes even more important if you're going to be exercising in the morning, and you'd follow that same rule, 15 grams of protein, 30 grams of carbs prior to exercise to get that fuel on board. There are studies that now show that the best changes in women as far as metabolism and being metabolically healthy is when you balance your circadian clock with eating. So first food of the day is approximately 8 a.m. So this is for women that it works in your schedule. Don't get too hung up on this. But first food of the day by about 8 a.m. and then last food of the day by about 6 p.m. So many health benefits to that, which I've talked about before. But this one is just completely different and specifically looking at balancing your circadian clock and how that relates to metabolism and weight loss and energy and hormone balance. So those are the ideal rules when it works out in your life. So these same studies also show that eating first thing in the morning will help you sleep better at night. So how cool is that? You eat during that 30-minute cortisol spike, and you're going to sleep better at night as a result of that, because cortisol in check means other hormones are in check. So some simple nutrition guidelines to take away here. Eat within 30 minutes of waking to prevent cortisol crashes. Hopefully you got that one already. Fuel pre and post workout. So we talked about the pre, 15 to 20 grams of protein, about 30 grams of carbs. Doesn't have to be exact by any means. Post exercise, you want about 30 to 40 grams of protein within about 2 hours. And this is different likely than what you've heard. There's nothing wrong with having that within 30 minutes. The general recommendation has always been 30 grams within 30 minutes. That is actually based on men because of the hormonal differences. Men seem to respond better to that. But with women, you've got about a 2-hour window in there. But even if you're not hitting that window, anytime is better than no time at all. And then you want to avoid fasted training, because that fasted training, as a reminder, depletes muscle and bone mass over time. And if you're training fasted, take that high-quality amino acid. Eat 3 to 4 high-quality protein-rich meals per day, approximately a gram of protein based on ideal body weight. And then the number one nutrition takeaway, this is what you should remember. The average American woman gets 70% of her daily calories from ultra-processed food, or as I call it, food-like substances. So don't be average. Just focus on getting as much real whole food the way that God intended on a daily basis, and your hormones, bones, and the rest of your body will thank you for that. Moving into supplements. Always recommend starting with the foundational four. But why? So why the foundational four? That's actually one of the biggest questions that I get. So the foundational four supplements, which what I call them, and most experts that talk about nutrition and study supplements would agree with this really, really closely, if not exact, would be number one, a methylated multivitamin. Hugely important to make sure it's methylated. Vitamin D3 with K2 to ensure that the D3 is going to absorb better. Spore-based probiotics. Spore-based probiotics are better than regular probiotics because they can survive the gut, the intestines, and you get more of them that are viable. So they're usable, feeding all of the other good bacteria in your gut, which helps to build about 70 to 90% of your immune system. And then omega-3 EPA, DHA, fish oil from a high quality source with things like mackerels and sardines. Those things are really, really important. Don't get it from tuna and other sources that are high in mercury and other toxins. So those foundational four, and this is going back to the why. The foundational four are giving you the building blocks that most people are lacking because of their nutrition and because, honestly, of our food supply being awful even when you're focusing on it. And when you have those proper building blocks, your body can methylate properly, metabolism works better, sleep, energy, focus are better, and most importantly, you turn your body into a daily healing machine because you're giving it the building blocks it needs to perform the functions that it needs on a daily basis. And then beyond the foundational four, I'm a big fan of combo supplements because there's so many different great vitamins, minerals, herbs, and if you put them in one supplement, you're covering a lot of bases. So really, really great thing to do. Nutridyne, which has the foundational four, which we have a link to on our website, offers all the foundational four products that I specifically mentioned, as well as some supplements that are called menopause support, perimenopause support, estro balance, and those supplements contain many of those different nutrients and herbs and essential oils. Really great, great quality supplements that, yes, can help your body function better, but they can also support you when you need support for symptoms as you're changing your lifestyle, hopefully. Hydration. Minimum, as you've heard me say probably 100 times, half of your ideal body weight in ounces of water per day, up to 1 gallon. So if somebody weighs 150 pounds, shoot for 75 ounces of water per day. You want to sip that water gradually throughout the day, which results in better absorption rather than just gulping it 2 or 3 times throughout the day, sipping gradually throughout the day so you're not peeing it all out. And then adding electrolytes for increased hydration. So electrolytes, the magnesium, sodium, potassium, those things help you hydrate better. It gets the water into the cells better. So I'm a big fan of an electrolyte called Element. I'm also a big fan of just taking like Baja Gold sea salt and adding it to your water, especially first thing in the morning. But you just want to make sure that you're getting a high quality one, that you're not taking something off the average store shelf, which is loaded with sugar and all kinds of other bad things. And then the number one hydration takeaway: if you are chronically dehydrated, it is impossible for your body to produce and balance hormones properly, or to sleep properly, or build muscle properly, for proper brain function, or do anything properly for that matter. Your body literally requires not just water, but it requires proper hydration of that water getting into every single cell in your body. I can't overstate that. And little bonus here, did you know things like fresh air, grounding with your bare feet on the earth, getting proper sunlight in your eyes and on your skin make a dramatic difference in every aspect of your health, as well as how well your body is able to absorb water and nutrients. So hugely important. And what do all of those things have in common? They're free. Just go outside barefoot. Fantastic. Sleep. Red or orange light, 1 to 2 hours before bed, because you're reducing blue light, which is naturally supposed to happen with the sun and all that, before the invention of blue light bulbs, which show up as white light, but it's called blue light. You want to stop eating 2 to 3 hours before bed so you can digest and rest properly. Caffeine intake, hold off till 90 minutes after waking, and then stop caffeine intake afternoon. Number one sleep takeaway is lack of sleep, especially lack of good, proper, deep stages of sleep, has a huge effect also on hormonal balance and will make someone going through perimenopause especially spiral out of control with their symptoms. So just please don't, for your own sake, let things like a caffeine addiction, late night food cravings, or cell phone and TV addictions, don't let those things, especially later in the day, rob you of vital healing sleep, which is so important. You don't have to be perfect. So I don't want that to be the takeaway, but you can be just absolutely nailing your exercise. You can be nailing your nutrition, and then you don't drink water just because you don't like drinking water. I hear that all the time, which is so ridiculous if you actually think about that. You don't get the same benefits of all of that hard work you're putting in with exercise, all of that hard work you're putting in by focusing on more nutrition. Same thing goes with sleep. You can be nailing all of those other things, and then you're like, I can get by on 4 hours of sleep, or I'm going to sit in bed and read my cell phone with a horrible posture right until I lay my head on the pillow and then sleep with my cell phone next to me. When you do that, you're just screwing up all of the other hard work that you're putting in. So just make those little changes. They're not that hard. Don't sabotage yourself by giving in to those addictions and cravings. In closing, menopause is absolutely, positively a natural aging process. But I promise you, when it comes to the very challenging, difficult symptoms, there is so much more going on than the natural aging process. And this is where lifestyle comes in. So just like anything in life, it comes down to choices. And I can tell you from my experience over the last 25 years working with thousands of women, which this isn't really fair, but if I, just to get my point across, lump all of those women into 2 categories of what I literally hear on a daily basis. You have Camp A that will mention a symptom to me. Well, how do I fix my hot flashes? And then I start to give them a simple action step, and the immediate response, well, that doesn't work for me. Nothing works for me. That's Camp A. And I can't tell you how many times I hear that. Camp B, same scenario. How do I fix my hot flashes? And I give them an action step. I explain the difference of HIT versus zone 2 and how that has an impact. And their response is, wow, I can make my symptoms better by just simply changing the way that I exercise or a little bit of nutritional change. Absolutely. Tell me what to do. Sign me up. So that's the difference between Camp A, Camp B. You have to decide what camp you're in. And I pray for your sake and all of your loved ones that it's Camp B. The inspirational and educational takeaways for today. Number 1, as always, success equals simple habits performed daily over time. Change doesn't take place overnight, so be patient with yourself and with your body and the way that it changes. Also remember, the things that are easy to do are easy not to do. I think that's a Zig Ziglar quote. I should find that out. Don't let that be an excuse to skip them. Is it easy to go for a walk every day? Absolutely. So it's easy to say, I'm going to skip that today. Is it easy to eat an apple or to start your day with some protein? Yes. It's also easy to say, not a big deal. I'm going to skip that. It's so easy. Don't make that mistake. Simple habits performed daily over time equals success. Number 2, today's podcast should give you all the info you need to make a huge, and I mean huge, difference in your life if you take this to heart and apply it. But for those of you that want to take it to the next level, be sure to go to foundationalhealth foundationalhealth365.com and download the Mastering Menopause Guide, where we'll walk you through 60 days of easy to incorporate lifestyle changes. I promise if you take action, the best is yet to come. You got this. Number 3, you're a leader. Be a leader for the younger women and the girls in your life. Remind them what they do early on in their life will have a huge impact on how they experience menopause and perimenopause and post-menopause, how they experience those menopause years of life. What you do early on has a big role in that. Doesn't mean it's ever too late if you haven't started early on, but early on, obviously, certainly is better. And then remember, leadership happens through action and not just words. If you enjoyed today's podcast and found it beneficial, I want you to think about all of the women in your life that need to hear this message and then be a leader for them. Hit the share button on whatever platform you're listening to and drop them a text with the link to this episode. If you haven't done that before, it is super easy. You just hit that share button and all of a sudden it'll give you the option of sharing that as a text, sharing it as an email. Together we can make a difference. Until next time, make health your hobby. Thank you for listening to the Foundational Health Podcast. As always, if you would like to learn more about making health your hobby, visit our website at foundationalhealth365.com and follow me on Facebook at Kevin Schultz, DC, Foundational Health.